Thank you, my dear friend. Nobody does it better than Alice. So welcome. My name's Lauren. My friends call me LB. After 20 years leading tech sales teams and training divisions, bouncing back and forth, I became an entrepreneur. All three of my brands are dedicated to helping people feel more successful at work because that just changes everything, doesn't it? So today I'm going to take you on my journey of the past 2 years where I really aligned to my passion and started focusing particularly, like Alice said, on getting more women into sales leadership and reversing that trend of zero growth in women in sales leadership positions. I learned recently there's one industry with fewer women in leadership besides sales, and that is supply chain, which is a fancy way of saying there were more male long haul truckers than female. So I'm going to share with you some of our insights, a few crazy theories that proved right and those that proved wrong, some really fun research about men and women, and actions we can all take to develop and help get more women promoted in sales-related careers. So spoiler alert, we created a program special just for women to attack this problem, and it's working. Girls Club is made possible like this conference by our generous sponsors. In fact, you've heard from two people who helped us get started already. Thank you to Chris Beal and Jamie Crosby at Connect and Sell and Proactivate. Without your help, we wouldn't be here. And we love Chorus, we love Gong, we love Ambition and Bomb Bomb and Level 11 and everybody who brought this program to life with me in the last 2 years. So let's take a look for a second about women in sales. Turns out we belong here. All kinds of data about how women aren't just good at it, we're great at it. Check it out. 11% higher close rates, more women meeting quota. Even at leadership positions, HBR says that women are scoring higher in leadership competencies. And at the executive position, when females are in charge, there's 35% higher return on equity. So, hey, way to go, ladies. Why aren't there more of us here? There's still some work to do, right? Women are underrepresented at all levels. Good news from McKinsey tells us that in the last 5 years, women have grown in the C-suite. SVP level went from 23 to 28%. C-suite grew from 17 to 21%. So we're getting there. But there are still consistently more men earning promotions and the higher salary, which is, sorry that there's a problem, right? Anyway, about 2 years ago, 2018, I got asked to speak on another breakfast panel at a conference about why this is happening and the root of the problem. And to be honest, they're fun conversations, but we go in circles, right? Again and again and again. And right about the same time, somebody introduced me to a study you may have already heard about. I think it was published by Forbes. It came out of HP, and it's called the Confidence Gap. And what it says is if there's a job description, a posting or a promotion, and there are 10 items listed, as men will apply if we have 6 out of 10, right? I can do it, lucky to have me. Women wait until they have literally 10 out of 10. Every single thing on the list until we feel confident we can meet all of those, we don't raise our hands. And that's when it hit me. I already owned a training company that taught sales management skills. And I'm like, I'm in a position to solve for this. So being a training geek, like many of my fellow attendees here today, I started writing the curriculum, like literally at the conference in a session. Not that any of you multitask in a session. I was like, oh, here's what it's going to look like. And I started drawing all these charts and graphs and ideas, and it just blew up. It came to me like you wouldn't believe. I knew we needed the sales management skills, right? We had to know what the job was about and how to do it to feel confident. Mentoring was a no-brainer, especially if we could find female mentors. I really wanted to include role models. Alice and the Women's Sales Pros group, started by Jill Conrath and Lori Richardson, showed me what a difference it makes when you have role models, especially ones that are like you. I didn't have that coming up. Spotlight was important too. I wanted to make sure that women were getting a little more recognition, not just at work, but also out on stages and lists and social media, etc. But something was missing, you guys, right? There was still there's a magic bullet I knew that we needed to address directly, and boom, this is it, confidence. Even with all the preparation and the training, it takes confidence to take the risk to raise your hand. And listen, I have to share that I knew all about this. I grew up a really confidence challenged young woman. I became a pretty great at faking it later, but it's something I still work on. And I got brave enough to learn out loud in the Girls Club community, and so did other women. We talk a lot about imposter syndrome and fixing this. So how is I going to do it in a training program? Well, I asked Billy Beane, of course. What? Anybody heard of the movie Moneyball? Billy Beane from the Oakland A's? Ladies in the audience, this may help. Brad Pitt played him in a movie a few years back. The idea here is that Billy Beane really shocked the industry by spending his budget not on great hitters, not on amazing pitchers, not on the guys who sold seats, but the unknown players who statistically could get on first base more often. Well, why do we care about that? Because we can't get home if we can't get on first. If you're not into baseball, this will help. You can't get home if you can't get on first, all right? Everything crystallized for me at that moment. I knew where we needed to target. If we were going to get more women into leadership, I wanted to target first base, that first rung or first promotions. In fact, there's been a study about this. It's called the broken rung, the entry level. I knew if we could get more women there, then they could continue to rise. And then we would help each other up. We would multiply. We'd be like an alien nation, penetrating all levels of society before the big attack. Kidding. And in the end, instead of alien attack, we decided to call it Girls Club. Truthfully, the very first name I had for it 2 years ago was the Badass Women of Sales. And as most of my male buddies refer to it, we also answer to that girl power thing. All right, 2 years later, here's what we look like. Our generation 2, look at all of these logos. Big companies, small companies, tech, non-tech, SaaS and non-SaaS, as we know you guys define the world in SaaS. Another surprise to us, of all of these participating companies, 200 active participants, 100 companies, half of the women who applied and became proteges or participants in our certification program were existing managers. They were already on the first rung. Well, it turns out we learned that women still weren't necessarily getting the support that they needed at that level. And I sure understand that. I felt that way when I was a frontline manager. Here's more that we learned. 75% of the women told us that their company was willing to hire and support female leaders, but only 62% felt like they had equal opportunity. That's fascinating. Only 30% had internal mentors, and less than that actually had any internal leadership development programs. Now, I've been a leader of training departments. It's expensive and it's hard to put on. I get that. But in general, we're not giving leaders the training and support they needed. And we learned how critical this was to women. So we had 50 women accepted in the first cohort. We had 65 women accepted in the second cohort. And when they come in, we always ask, what's your wish list? Well, sure enough, we were right. Confidence was the #1 rated wish skill. In fact, it was rated #1 by over 90% of the participants. Oof, that led us to this depressing statistic. 28% of our women in the programs felt they wouldn't be taken seriously as a high-performing sales manager, which is why 40% of the women in the program had never actually applied before. So they were coming to us before ever raising their hand and going for a position. They were waiting. So we dug into that some more and we asked why. Top 3 reasons. I need to learn more in my current job. I'm not ready for the next job. I'm not sure I'll succeed. We put those together under more to master. That's right. They cited perfectionism, just like the HP study said. So that's led me on a journey for the last 2 years. And I'm asking myself, why do we do this? I hunted for answers. Check this out. It turns out the area in the brain responsible for recognizing flaws, the medial frontal cortex, is larger in women. Now that's a big deal because men's brains are larger than women's brains, same number of cells, but this area is bigger. Scientists call it hypervigilance or perfectionism. We might call it insecurity, or what you might tell your mom is just plain being nitpicky. In fact, grooming actually releases endorphins for females, not males. That means our brains reward us for wanting to look perfect and be perfect. Double whammy. Now add in this crazy, right? The media pressure for female perfection. Ladies were literally fighting nature and nurture to not be perfectionists. There's one more piece of the study that's pretty interesting. You guys probably already know that when we're under stress, the brain releases cortisol. That's why my hands are sweating right now. I'm nervous, right? Totally normal. Cortisol is what's involved in fight or flight. But the female brain can reduce the cortisol levels by organizing and digging into details. It helps us feel more in control. This is what our husbands might call crawling up my shorts, okay? We all come by it very honestly. And by creating a safe atmosphere in our all-female training program that celebrates risk-taking and actively works to reduce the perfectionism, we watched women take more risks. We watched them take off like rockets. All right, let's summarize a few key learnings so far. Perfectionism is real. We need to help women train and prepare to move up before applying. So I think it's normal to say you get the job and then at some point there's job training available if we're lucky, right? Backwards. Interesting, right? We also need to proactively encourage women to train and apply. And we can do this also by publishing our openings with the criteria. And as you probably already guessed, the shorter the list, the more women will apply. We can also make sure that we're pre-publishing what those career paths are. Women are a little nervous asking. I've got a story to tell you. Let me put up the rest of my conclusions here. A couple of years ago, I was speaking at a women's event at Outreach, one of our wonderful partners. You all know Outreach. This was a women in sales event. There's about 50 women drinking wine at a local bar and probably about 5 dudes. And I always go talk with the men, right? Help them feel comfortable at these things. And something fascinating happened. Ross, a sales director, was standing there with his new hire. We'll call him Kid because he was, bless him. He was like 4 minutes old in the organization. I think this was Thursday and he started Monday. And in the course of the conversation, talking about Girls Club and our mission, Kid says to Ross, how do you get up around here? Get up, move up around here. And Ross laid it out, right? Here's the normal steps. Here's the normal time. Here's how it works, da, 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 da. At the end of about 5 minutes, I said, I'm sorry, I have to butt in. Those of you who know me, no big surprise. Ross, was that weird? This guy's been here a minute. Was it bizarre at all that he asked about this? And Ross was like, no, it's totally normal. We want people to ask. I love seeing the ambition, right? And by the way, this kid still texts me every 6 months, giving me updates on who he is. Flash forward, 45 minutes later, after the panel, we're taking questions. Last question, a little hand goes up at the very, very back. And she says, I've been the top BDR at my company for 2 years. When is it too early to start asking about promotion opportunities? And there is the difference between men and women. So we can fight that by doing what you see on this screen. Interesting, right? So I'm going to skip to the end of the program and share a few more surveys on what we've learned and some takeaways. At the end, we said, what was your favorite part? I figured confidence, number 1, right? No, it did not take the number 1 spot. In fact, it only took 1 out of the top 4. Now, this is interesting because there's a good 20, 25 components throughout the program. And each month there's 2 or 3 live courses, management skills, role model stuff, confidence stuff. And the live interaction sessions trumped all, taking 2 of the top 4 spots. Well, isn't that interesting? Let's dig into that. Turns out women prefer to work in groups. Why? There's a Partners in Leadership research study that tells us women are more likely to associate and be more talkative with other women. By the way, this is one of the reasons we require an application to Girls Club, because they have to enroll an advocate in their companies to be part of the program. And an advocate is somebody at your company who acts a bit like a mentor. They speak for you when you're not in the room. And we all know that promotion decisions come down to that. The advocate will work with her monthly on what we're learning, discussions, et cetera. It's part of that spotlight opportunity. By the way, it greatly reduces our number of applicants because we're afraid to talk to them a little bit, but it made a huge difference for these women. We also learned that these live sessions may be the only places where they feel comfortable and confident speaking up. Here's why. A study out of Princeton University said, who speaks more in meetings? Are you ready to hear what percentage women speak in mixed groups? Only 25%. Men dominate group mixed discussions. So what happens if we put more women into the group? This study just really lit my fire. George Washington University dug in deeper and said, okay, we've got groups of 5. There's males and there's females, right? When do women start to talk in equitable amount? So out of 5, that's 20%, right? How long does it take? How many women? If we put 2 women in, will they talk more? Well, no. If 3 out of 5 are women, do they talk more? No. It took not just a majority, but what they call a super majority. 4 or 5 of the people in a group had to be women for the women to speak just an equitable amount. Was it the same for men? Nope. He could be the lone male in a group and he had no problem talking. So they asked the women why. Reason 1, I don't know if I have good ideas. Reason 2, I don't want to appear too aggressive. 3, I'm not sure I'm comfortable speaking on my feet. 4, I'm afraid of being wrong. Women felt safe in the female supermajority groups that we created in Girls Club. Many spoke up for the first times, and when they did, they excelled, and they started building habits for that. So it turns out that the reasons women weren't speaking up, they weren't wrong, right? Although when men speak up, they're deemed 10% more competent. Is it the same for women? What's the percentage? Ask yourself in your head. Here we go. The number's 14, but unfortunately it's negative 14. That's right. When women are speaking up, they're actually deemed less competent in these studies. Isn't that fascinating? Sheryl Sandberg from Lean In talks about this all the time. It's been published a whole bunch of places. This is called the double bind, the competency likability trade-off. When a woman expresses female characteristics like warmth and welcoming all ideas and caring, etc., she's seen as less competent. But when we take on the male characteristics, which would be called maybe speaking freely, assertiveness, speaking out, disagreeing, our likability suffers. The double bind, or as I like to call it, damned if you do, damned if you don't. So Girls Club gave women this safe female majority to speak up, to test their knowledge and gain confidence when it went well. Turns out safety isn't the only reason our groups ranked highest. Let's go back to the brain. Turns out women are also hardwired for social connection. It's rooted in caveman history. In prehistoric times, women with stronger social connections had higher survival rates, whereas male survival depended on aggression and competition. It may also be why we're hardwired to build consensus and collaboration and build relationships. Isn't that fascinating? By the way, female brains actually produce dopamine, that feel-good chemical, when relationship building, and by the way, also when gossiping. So yes, it's true, women aren't always nice to each other, right? In fact, who interrupts women more? Turns out men and women both in these group settings interrupted women more. So in this span of about 5 minutes, men interrupted men 2 times. Men interrupted women 2.6 times. But get this, women interrupted men once. Women interrupted women 2.8 times. It's 180% more. Isn't that crazy? By the way, it changed just a little bit when there was the majority or the male or female in the group. So when the woman was the minority, most of the interruptions were 70% negative. When the woman was in the majority, look how it changed the men's behavior. 20% negative. So I found this just fascinating. A few conclusions we can draw when working on our development programs. Add live discussions to your content. Put women in groups together, right? I know that the women are underrepresented in sales, and if you're doing a training breakout or we're working in projects or you're doing an annual planning meeting, it might make sense to divide the women among the groups. Don't let them be in a group together. Help them get the supermajority. We can also facilitate our trainings and our meetings better, right? Encouraging participation from everybody. And I love this. Have you ever heard of the no Kanye rule? This is going back to when Kanye stole the microphone from Taylor Swift to talk about Beyonce in the middle of the award show, 10 years back. There are places where they've instituted the no interruptions and called it the no Kanye rule in meetings. I thought that's interesting. Finally, we can help women find spotlights and advocates. And all of those are components you can steal from our program and put into yours to help more women rise to the top. Okay, so a few other interesting differences I found between men and women in how they learn. Probably no surprise to learn that women excel at the verbal stuff, right? Verbal ability, fine motor coordination, reading comprehension, writing ability. Men reign in logical reasoning, systematic analysis, visuospatial skills, and aiming projectiles. Swear to God, that's in the research. Women are more internally motivated. That means I'm going to do it for the love of the learning, and I'm going to attribute my success towards my efforts. Men are more externally motivated. I'm going to do this to get ahead or to achieve or win. And when I do, I'm going to attribute the success to the teaching. So by the way, if you run training and you want a great testimonial, ask the guys for that, for anything. Women tie information to past experiences. We like collaboration, and we prefer a single learning mode. You've probably heard of visual or verbal, etc. Women like single modes. That was new to me. Men can juggle more in short-term memory, prefer chances to work independently, and prefer multiple learning modes. And in case any of this started to sound unfair to the opposite sex, by the way, women get more clinical depression and PTSD, and men are more often addicts and schizophrenics. So it turns out we can't actually take sex out of the workplace. Big epiphany, men and women are different. Duh. I want to tell you another story. Each year, we've invited some of our allies. These are men who are in our program, who are mentors and advocates and sponsors. And some brave men have come into a private session, and we talk about the differences between us. And the women ask the burning questions, right? Like, do you treat us differently? Is there a boys' club? Do you talk about us when we're not there? Do we really get fair treatment? How do I handle getting hit on at a work event? Which, by the way, we took a straw poll at the time, 100%. That happened too. All right. In these discussions, women shared that they didn't want to be treated any differently than the men. And men shared that, in honesty, they were a little bit nicer, maybe a little gentler, because they were afraid of making a woman cry on their team. Which, by the way, led the women to this bit of advice for our male counterparts. Even though so many men get involved in Girls Club because they're inspired by their daughters, their wives, or their mothers, women are telling us, don't treat us like your daughter, your wife, or your mother. Treat us like your sister. You'd give your sister a hard time, right? In public, you'd take it if she dished it back. You wouldn't worry about walking on eggshells. It's this kind of authentic and vulnerable sharing and educating that is at the heart of Girls Club. And sure, there's some really interesting science behind the stereotypes, but there's also some blind spots and misconceptions and hard actions we can all take to address the confidence gap and the brain wiring differences and some of the fears that we all have in the workplace. Vulnerability makes a difference, and authenticity makes a difference. It's easy to joke about things like mansplaining and manterrupting, but that's not fair. Ladies, we wouldn't take it if they went around calling us timid mice and mutes, right? So mutual respect, of course, is important. So let's talk a little bit about where we ended up. We had a lot of intentional curriculum set up and some accidental learning along the way. So here's one of our surprises. 70% of our rep level proteges earned their promotions before the program was over. That happened in both of our first two cohorts. We thought it would be good, but we didn't know it would be so high. This is proof to us that these women just needed a few tiny roadblocks moved out of their way, and they were there and they took off like rockets. I said 52, but I just found out today we're actually at 54. It's hard to track. We've got some women in generation 1 who have already been promoted 2 and 3 times, and we're gearing up to do it all again in generation 3. This stat I'm most proud of, 100% would recommend the program to a friend. All right, so let's talk about some hard actions that we can take about training and promoting women. Number 1 answer on the board, add a mentorship program at work. Brandon Hall did a study recently saying to us that if you're going to bring women in, so attract and hire women, if you're going to promote women to management and leadership, and if you're going to support them in leadership, the number 1 thing you can do in each one of those instances was a mentoring program. Help her find role models and internal advocates. A mentor is great, but these things are also very, very important. We've already talked about the no Kanye rule. What a fun thing to try. Relate training to past experiences. Now, anybody in training here knows that that's just called good adult learning. It's especially important to add additional time, right? Don't skip it. It's really important for the women. Also, don't force multimodal. I'm learning now, right? So when I'm creating e-learning for the group, I make sure my slides can stand alone. They can turn off the audio if that works for them. You don't have to come to XYZ session. You can replay on your own. Try to put women in female majority or supermajority groups. Define and publish those career paths and promotion opportunities. By the way, they also want to see the criteria, right? There is a perception that certain people will get picked and that women don't think it will be them. I showed you those statistics. I don't think that's always true. It's a perception, okay? If that's the case, you can get rid of it by saying, here's the application process, here are the criteria, here are the people in the panel, right? Just getting rid of the, oh, they're going to pick their favorites might make a huge difference in how many apply. We've seen that happen internally at companies who will have one seat for Girls Club and then they apply to come into it. Target the broken rung. If you're not sure where to start, we've seen success. Start with frontline management. That's going to make a long-term difference. Also, allow pre-job training. So I don't know that I ever would have thought of this back when I was running training divisions. We're not going to apply until we feel ready. We're not going to feel ready till we get the training. So if you have a management development program, right, why not open additional seats to build your bench? Well, that just makes sense anyway, right? If you can apply to get in the bench part of the training, then we win. Finally, number 10, and most important, encourage her to apply. I can't tell you how many times I've heard stories about women who waited and waited and waited and waited and waited and then wound up interviewing somebody who would be their boss. Well, that didn't go over very well. They felt passed up. She was waiting to be asked. By the way, then she votes with her employment and leaves. Encouragement's the magic button, and it goes like this. I think you're fantastic. Have you ever thought about being in management? That easy. The worst case scenario, you made her day. Best case scenario, you just changed her career. So that is an action that we can all take. Women, there's more actions that we can take, right? Recognizing the confidence gap, taking risks before we're ready. Right now, having a conversation with somebody at work who cares about you and your development, about what does it take? Be the kid in Ross and have the discussion about career paths. Ask for budget to go get training and development. Go find your own advocate and mentor. And while you're at it, please encourage 3 more women along the way. All right. If you don't have an internal program or budget, or you'd like to see more women get into management, then it's good timing. Our applications are open through November 15th. Come try Girls Club. When you buy a seat for your company, we also give you templates and checklists to create that internal application process, and a proud Girls Club supporter badge for your website that helps with recruiting. If you don't have any women in sales, but you're loaded with money, then you can always come in and be a sponsor, and everybody gets an automatic nomination for top 25 companies where women want to work. We encourage you to go and nominate a company right now. If you're a geek and you love the research, download the slides. You can go read some of those studies as well. And I invite you to connect. I can't wait to hear if we have some questions.